Well, I can tell you right now, especially being in the Vegas Valley, we've got some sunny weather. The sun is shining, and I'm not too worried about what's going on the outside. I know that we have a lot going on with the pandemic, but we are doing our absolute best to get through this together. So I've got a really good guest on here for me back here on the Snake Sports Talk Show. He's a great colleague of mine. He covers a lot. He covers college football and basketball. Also, he loves his Green Bay Packers, and he talks a lot about the NFL and even on the NBA. Sports guy Chris, you can look him up on Instagram and all the social media platforms. Subscribe to his YouTube channel. Great content, great stuff. Chris, I know we have a lot of stuff to talk about here with, are we ever going to see some normalcy back when sports gets back up and running anytime soon? I mean, it's been kind of crazy the last couple of days.
It's been crazy. I really hope so. So, Jake, first, thanks for having me on. Big fan of the show for sure. So, I really hope so. I'm like the rest of all of us here, really, been trying to fill the void, but hoping to get some sports back for sure. I still think we're, a little ways away yet, but I think we're going to get them back, no doubt. It's some way, shape, or form. I'm sure they're going to be a little bit different than what we're used to seeing. And whatever professional sports we get this year, I think we all probably have to understand it's going to look and feel a little different, at least for 2020, whether we get, when we get them back at that point. So with the developments and everything, but I think all of us would welcome that at this point, even if a changed sports that's going to look and feel a little different to have something back. I'm sure we would all be a big fan of that at this point. So, but along with you, sunny outside here in Southern California. We had about a week straight of rain, which is unusual for us in these parts, but we'll take it. But the sun is out today and back to blue skies. So a beautiful day here as well, my friend. Yes.
That's great. Yeah, I know we had some rains, of course. They've been kind of brushy rains, and it's been a little bit cool as well. I know that we're kind of getting through the last push and finally getting into summer, and so. But because I know out in California, I've got family that live up in Northtown, and I know it's been like a complete lake bed with this whole entire coronavirus and the shutdown. So it's been kind of tough for a lot of people on the West Coast, even with regards to, because I have a lot of colleagues that are in the East Coast, and they've been dealing with a lot around in Philadelphia, New York City. Right. So much that's been happening. So, but I want to dig in a little bit closer because. Sure. You've been covering this now for a couple of days now, and you've been talking a lot more about, trying to get sports back up and running. Adam Silver, of course, came out in the commissioners meeting with the president and has been inquiring about sports leading the way of getting the economy back up and running. Because we know that there are a lot of people that are affected from some of their small businesses. A lot of people in the sports industry, they're affected with their jobs, especially concessions, lots of people. So what have been your thoughts with as far as, what sports could definitely do when we decide to start getting it back up and running again?
Great, yeah, great question. I agree with Adam Silver and the others. Sports could certainly be in the forefront. I mean, it's such a huge industry in our country and really around the world. It really, really is. But especially here, the big thing I think with it is, we'd all love to see it come back, but it's more of the average person, the guy that is showing you where to park in the parking lot of the stadiums, the guy that gets you your beer, your peanuts at the baseball game, the guy that checks your ticket off as you come in the ballpark or the arena and so on and so forth. Making sure if we can bring it back that we can have these guys, employed as well in some way, shape, or form. Certainly. If you can get some games going again and get the networks broadcasting games, the revenue that flows in with that, of course, there's a money flow that goes along with it. But I would love to see a way or have us get to the point where there's a little bit, hopefully it's soon here, where the precautions are lifted a little bit, where we could actually get some of those folks that would see the biggest benefit, returning back to work as well. I'm all for it. I want to get the return of sports as well. But I'd like, if possible, I'd like to see it with some kind of fans in the stands. Of course, I can understand if the first step is playing in empty arenas or ballparks just to kind of get the ball rolling. But to really bring back and I think give the economy that kind of surge, if we could get everybody back and going back out to the ball games and just everything that would bring with it, all the employees and the trickle down that goes along with it. So hopefully we could get to that point. I do like the talk. I mean, I like that we've got the commissioners of different sports and those people in power out there having the conversations, right? Trying to come up with some creative ways to get it going. So I like that aspect of it. I don't know if we've got a concrete plan yet, obviously, but I like the early discussions and the fact that we're going down that road and hopefully can come up with something that'll work to get sports back and going. So
sports guy Chris here joining me on the show. And you know what, I do agree, because the thing of it is I give kudos to two organizations, the NBA and the NFL. Look, Adam Silver, I think, has been the absolute catalyst as far as leadership-wise of trying to because he's the kind of guy that loves his players. He protects his players as much as he can. And the other thing is, too, I give kudos to the NFL, because at least they have been providing a lot of content for guys like you and I and for other, top guys as well, to have something to talk about other than –
Yes, absolutely.
So let me shift to this. You've been covering as well a lot of you've been doing a bracket of what could have been of the market in this deal, because you know what, it was kind of hard. Like, it was kind of hard for me with as far as I was supposed to be in Los Angeles actually on my birthday week in March, going to my first NBA game, and now that's not happening. But March Madness, and I think that's been kind of hard because some of these college athletes, seniors, they're getting ready to graduate. Now they can't even showcase their skills to, potential organizations when they go into the draft. How difficult has that been for some of these players? Because I know they're thinking of, trying to showcase their skills to get in, not to mention, too, you have because March Madness has always been connecting with players, connecting with athletes. You have the fans, you've got parents, you've got coaches. Well, how difficult could that have been now for college basketball as a whole, knowing that, without this, like, how could they have panned all this out and be able to do this tournament? It's kind of impossible at this point.
Yeah. That was a tough one, obviously. I mean, I'm with the just like many out there. I really feel March Madness is really the best single sporting event we have on a yearly basis in this country. That's just me. That's my opinion. But the excitement and everything, and just everything at play, the opportunity for so many different teams to compete. So, but you're right. I mean, if you're a college basketball player, you're competing. Yeah, it's nice to win a regular season conference championship, but you're trying to play in the NCAA tournament. You're trying to live out that March Madness, have your opportunity on the big screen. And you made an excellent point when you talk about guys and increasing their draft stock and so on and so forth. Go back a year ago, right? Ja Morant, an incredible point guard, and he was having a terrific season last year. If there's no March Madness and there's no 12 seed Murray State and Ja Morant putting on a show for 2 games in the NCAA tournament over that first weekend, I'm not so sure he takes the whole NBA draft by storm along with Zion Williamson. I mean, that's a perfect example of a guy that went from being a lottery pick to a top 3 pick by being able to play and showcase his skills, like you said. So not only do you have some guys that are kind of, missing that opportunity, but just the guys in general who have played for 3 or 4 years, and maybe this was their opportunity to make a March Madness. Guys could go through their entire college career and never have an opportunity to make it. And, for guys like you made a good point, a senior, your last hurrah, you're thinking about going out, and all of a sudden, just like that, you can't play. I mean, I thought about it and thought, geez, could you imagine being an NFL player going through your entire season and you're ready to all of a sudden take the field in the Super Bowl in 2 weeks, and they say, actually, it's just not going to happen, period. Not postponed, but just completely suspended. I mean, you'd be pretty devastated. So for these guys, I think it's going to be interesting to see the impact on the NBA draft this year. But yeah, in general, it's very tough for these players. So you're kind of you didn't get that last chance to show, like you said, showcase your skills and potentially, make a case, whether it be to play overseas. A lot of times these guys have some good games. This is an opportunity for the rest of the world to see them as well. And, as you know, that it's a small amount of guys that advances on to the NBA. So a lot of times these guys have an opportunity to get picked up and some folks overseas, and they get a chance to go play professionally over there as well. So a lot of opportunities, just kind of not there anymore. So yeah, I hear you. I think it's a tough thing for these players, unfortunately. So at first I would have liked maybe to see a special rule where if you were a senior, you could come back next year, for that opportunity to get a chance at the tournament. But I know they cited against that, and I understand the reasons. But
so that was the one thing that I was also going to kind of shift towards as well, because think about it. You have right now the spring sport players who are eligible for at least another year, and they couldn't be able to give another eligible year for all these winter sport athletes. How big of an impact is that now, knowing that spring's able to get the eligibility and not for the ones during the winter, even with regards to March Madness?
Yeah, I completely understand the spring sports. I'm glad they did that. Their seasons were completely wiped out. I think you gotta give those kids another opportunity for sure. I would have liked to have seen it with the winter sports as well. I understand they had the opportunity to get the majority of their seasons in most cases, but at the same time, they were still robbed of those opportunities to finish off their seasons, to compete for championships, whether that be conference tournament routes or the national title. So I would have liked to see maybe just one special, just for this year, a special clause. And again, just for seniors, I've seen different arguments out there that, to carry that many extra seniors, scholarship again, the extra cost for the schools and so on and so forth. You're talking a handful of students, 3 or 4, maybe 5, maybe a school. I think there's enough money and resources out there to give those kids another opportunity. NCAA makes plenty of money off college football and college basketball every single year. So I think that would be a possibility. I understand the reasoning. They did get most of their seasons in, but I still am on in the camp where I would have liked to have seen something done for winter sports too. I don't know, some kind of special circumstance, resolution just for a season to at least give them the option, if they wanted to come back and play for one more year, it would be on the table for them. But
Sports Guy Chris here on the Snake Sports Talk Show. So let me ask you this: if the March Madness was to go on, because there were a lot of teams there were a lot of programs that I thought were very, very interesting. I will make a point. I think this could have been the year Gonzaga would have won the tournament, because Gonzaga's been the middle of the pack in either the top 10 or the top 5 in tournaments like this. But I think this really could have been the year, because Duke right now doesn't look the same. North Carolina, of course, had been going through some struggles as well. But there have been a lot of speculations of other programs like Dayton, San Diego State, and even for Baylor. To me personally, I liked San Diego State, but I don't think – because, look, we all know when we watch March Madness, it gets tougher by the time you get to the Elite Eight, the Final Four, and potentially to the championship. 2 teams, which one did you see could have potentially made an impact to maybe win the tournament, and which one did you see, I think most of the fans and, kind of overhyped the program and maybe not could have made it as far?
All right, great points. Great points, Jake. I'm with you. I really thought this year's March Madness could have had the opportunity to be one of the better, more wide open ones we've had in recent history. And I think Gonzaga would have been, in my opinion, one of the top 2 or 3 teams to win it all. I would have probably had the Zags in the Final Four. And I was also a big fan of Dayton. Obi Toppin was, in my opinion, the best player in the country this year. That was a wide open debate too. He was phenomenal, but Dayton shot 60% from 2-point field goal range on the season. That is incredible for a team to have a 2-point field goal percentage that high. And it bodes extremely well for tournament play. You know, we've seen it. A team can come in, they can shoot the lights out from 3-point range one day, and then the shots don't fall the next game and they get beat like they're supposed to. A team that relies heavily on threes can make a run, but they can go ice cold and get eliminated just like that. A team that shoots consistently and well on their 2-point field goals is a team I like in tournament play. I thought Dayton would have had a real chance to do something. And Gonzaga is a very, very solid club. They played a very tough non-conference. And when you looked at their conference this year, the West Coast, it was actually very strong. St. Mary's was a very highly rated team. They would have been in the tournament. And BYU had a, top 10 net rating. I mean, BYU would have been probably a 5 seed. So the Zags were tested in conference this year as well, which doesn't normally happen. So I'm with you. I thought Gonzaga would have had a great chance, and I thought Dayton would have had a great chance as well. I thought, despite the good record, I'm with you. I don't think Duke had what it would have took to make a run this year. I think they were still a little bit lacking. They didn't quite have the depth that they sometimes do. Florida State would have been the team out of the ACC that I would have looked at. They have a lot of length, a lot of different guys, not one particular guy that could score. Florida State would have been the team to keep an eye on. And as great as Kansas was playing, Kansas has trouble in the tournament a lot of times. And with this year's tournament, you look at the teams that would have been 8, 9 seeds, 4, 5 seeds. I think Kansas would have had a difficult problem getting to the Final Four. They're a good team, don't get me wrong, but they would have been that one like overwhelming kind of favorite team that I wouldn't have been quite so hot on. I'm with you. I think this could have been the year that, the first time since 1990 when UNLV won it with Larry Johnson and the boys back in the day, that in mid-major would have won the national title. And I would have went with either Gonzaga or Dayton. In fact, I would have loved to seen those two in the national title game. That would have been a great national title game. So.
Oh my gosh, I think that one would have definitely drew a crowd, and I think a lot of people because you have to think about, because that's the most exciting thing of March Madness. You're filling the brackets out, and last year completely threw all of us off because there were a lot of programs. Like Michigan State was one that I thought was interesting because I love Cassius Winston, and I thought he was very, very a good defensive player, somebody that could potentially come into the NBA as a good defensive prospect. And then not to mention, you looked at out of the curve, a Virginia team that just comes in and started playing. And I think it kind of threw a lot of people off because they all anticipated Duke would have been the team, or if not them, North Carolina would. But, you never know. And that's what's so exciting about March Madness like this. But as I've said, I do believe Gonzaga could have been the program who would have finally won it because they've been in the middle of the pack for years. Dayton, I think, would have been a surprise. But it's funny you brought up about Kansas because, look, I remembered years ago in middle school, and I remembered the national championship between Kansas and Memphis. You're absolutely right about that. And when you look at the Kansas team from then, and then the Kansas going into this tournament, you're absolutely right. I think that would have been a difficult matchup, and of course, difficult, position they would have been in with all these other programs, whether they're, the Power 5 conferences and whatnot, and then, just other teams too that could potentially surprise them.
I agree. Kansas was a great team. I had them, I finished my end of the season top 25. I had them number 1, just like everybody else out there. But just like you were just talking about, come tournament time might have been a little bit different. And let's just be honest, that's unfortunately for them, they've had a little bit of problems in the tournament under Bill Self. They won a title, but you brought up that great game years ago with Memphis. I mean, Memphis kind of had that game won. Kansas was able to rally and get it done, but you look at how good they've been over the years, and you would think for sure that they would have captured another one at some point in there, but just unable to get it done. But you kind of look at how their bracket would have went. They probably would have been in the Midwest, and you probably would have had a team like Wisconsin in there as a 4 seed or potentially 5 seed, a team that had been on fire. I mean, if you drew a Michigan State as potentially a 2 seed in that region, that would have been tough, or a 3. So I just looking at the teams they would have had to go against, would have been kind of tough for them. I could see Kansas being one of those upset victims again. Had it happened, could they roll to the Final Four? Sure, no doubt about it. But I'm with you. I do think going back to Gonzaga, this might have been the year for the Zags. They've had the experience. They've been there now the last couple tournaments, and again, I think that they would have came in very battle tested, just as battle tested as any Kansas or Duke or any blue blood, out there this year. So I would have liked them a lot. But Kansas, you kind of look at who they potentially would have had to take on, and anybody, even in that second round, Michigan, Iowa, Illinois, probably all would have been somewhere in the 7-8 range seed wise. That would have been a difficult second round matchup. So. It would have been, I think, a tough road for Kansas. A lot of those teams would have matched up potentially well with the Jayhawks too. Similar styles of play, decent guard play on all of those squads with a solid defense and rebounding. That's exactly what Kansas does. So it would have been, I think, difficult. Would have loved to see the games, of course, but
yeah. You and me both. Sports guy Chris here on the Snake Sports Talk Show. So let's shift to this because I know that we've got the NFL draft coming up here in just a few days. But here's one thing I want to talk about before we get up into the draft is something that happened recent. Dear Lord, what is going on with the Houston Texans? And not only that, but even the LA Rams. Look. I've said this. I went on a complete Twitter rant. I don't know if you had seen it, but I talked about the city of Houston, not the fans, because I feel bad for the fans, but I've been talking about the city of Houston with all their organizations. You got the Astros in the cheating scandal with the World Series. You got the Houston Rockets who don't even know what their identity is after you traded Clint Capella because you're dealing with that massive Westbrook contract, but now you're trapped and you're the shortest team in the NBA. And then you got the Houston Texans who – by the way, has not had a healthy offensive line for Deshaun Watson, who I feel like could suffer another ACL tear in his other knee. And then you've got, you trade away DeAndre Hopkins, his best receiver, to help produce this team for a second and a fourth round pick. Like I love the deal that the Vikings got for Stephon Diggs because at least they gave him a sense of security in the draft. But then all of a sudden they go and trade for Brandon Cooks of the Rams, who are also not in the best position, and you give away a second-round pick for that. So now you have no second-round pick for this year, no second-round pick for next year. You're losing the opportunities of getting better receivers. And now here's where I'm going to go off about Houston. You've got Cooks, who's had 5 concussion injuries and is close to being at retirement. You've got Will Fuller, who can't stay healthy from the neck down. And then you also have Randall Cobb, who the Green Bay Packers released him because of the fact he can't stay healthy on the field. And then you have Kenny Stills, who I like, but we missed the last 2 weeks. So for Houston, are you trying to come into this draft and even potentially into free agency with hurt receivers? Like, I don't know. What is your opinion on Houston?
I'm with you 110%. I did an article right when O'Brien did his first, blockbuster trade and swapped out one of the best receivers on the planet for a washed up running back that he's hoping, I guess, to get the 4-year-old version of. I'm not really sure, but I have to question what the Texans are doing from the top up. I mean, whenever you look at what they did, obviously, in that division game against the Chiefs, 24-0, your coach goes on a series of boneheaded calls to single-handedly allow them to get back in the game, whether it be the fake punt. There was a whole series of boneheaded things that he did in the second quarter to get them back in the game. And then after that, you decide to award this guy the GM duties. I mean, you say, all right, not only did he blow the playoff game from a coaching standpoint, right, but we're impressed enough with him. We're going to give him the operation duties, of everything. And then you made an excellent point, of course, with the trades and everything like that. It is clear to me, and I think you and everybody else out there, that Bill O'Brien does not have the same value in draft picks that the rest of us all do, or certainly the rest of the NFL does, because to trade one of the top 3 receivers on the planet and not even get a first-round pick back, and then later that night, like you said, you have the Vikings who trade Stephon Diggs, who's a great receiver, but he's not DeAndre Hopkins. and they get a first rounder back in return. I mean, just a couple hours later, his trade was completely undermined by a different team with a lesser receiver. And then I don't know if it was trying to save face or trying to figure out who, we got to bring a receiver in somehow. But then to trade a second round pick for Brandon Cooks, like you said, who's got the concussion history and everything else. I mean, again, this isn't the Brandon Cooks from 3 years ago that you're trading for. Could he bounce back and have a great season? Yeah, I suppose he could. But like you said, if I was the Texans going into this offseason, right, I was pretty well set at my receiver position. I had two glaring needs. I needed to shore up the offensive line, like you said, help protect my young star quarterback, and do something with my defensive secondary who couldn't cover me and you this past season. Let's be honest. I mean, their secondary was awful. They got roasted late in the season at home by Denver. Drew Lock's coming out party was roasting the Texans on their home field late in the season. And I saw that game and I thought this team has a lot of trouble, no matter if they make the playoffs or not. They're not going to go anywhere. They don't have a secondary. And they don't. So I haven't seen them improve their secondary at all, which is where I would have, if I was going to make trades and do all this other stuff, I would have did something to upgrade my defensive secondary so I could guard some people. Again, I'm in the AFC. I'm in the AFC where I've got Lamar Jackson airing it out all over. We've got Patty Mahomes throwing it all over the place. So the guys that you're competing with here, you gotta improve your defensive secondary. So for them to not do that was surprising for me. But I'm with you. I don't really understand what the Texans are doing. Certainly what Bill O'Brien is doing, and he's either gonna dig his own grave with these moves or not. Because you have to think if they take a step back this year, they would fire him and just start over. I mean, where else do you go otherwise? You just traded some really, your best asset away, essentially, outside of your young quarterback, and didn't get much of a return. So,
well, what's funny is, and I actually heard this from because not a lot of people do love the show, but I listen to Colin Cowherd all the time whenever I'm on the weekday. And the funniest thing that he pointed out, and one thing I'll say is, because you look at that AFC South and you look at exactly how everything is built around. You've got the Titans and you've got the Colts, two organizations who, by the way, Chris Ballard, one of the smartest young general managers in the league, who is set the Colts to be the best team that they can be. Now, getting Phillip Rivers, I thought, was great because at least he's got a really good, healthy offensive line, finally. And I do say that from a Charger background, which I don't always throw out behind the mic. The fact that he's going somewhere where he has a lot of time in the pocket. He's a pocket present quarterback. And now the Titans, I'm not sure how that they're going to perform, because the fact of now Ryan Tannehill has a brand new contract. You got Derrick Henry on a franchise tag. And we're not sure if we're going to see the same Cinderella story to get to the championship game like we saw a year ago. But the one thing that Cowherd Court was about Bill O'Brien. This is a two-piece set because it was about the Texans and it was about the Rams. Bill O'Brien, he said that he reminds you of the kid when your parents go out on vacation for 3 weeks and you're left with the house, you're left with all that power, and you've got all the money and you spend it in the first 3 weeks, and now you're left out trying to cover yourself, covering your you-know-what, with eating cornflakes for dinner, and now you're trying to come up with the perfect excuse of why everything is just the way that it's set to be. So I'm like, but for the Rams are in a position now where even if you got rid of Brandon Cooks, it's still not helping your situation, because the Rams, they're the type of organization they love. They don't like. They love their players. They pay them early. That's why you saw Todd Gurley, how he produced, and Brandon Cooks with the concussions. Then you ended up getting a couple of stars. Now you've lost them all. You lose Cooks, you lose Gurley, you lose Dante Fowler, and you even lose Clay Matthews and a bunch of others. So, with this cap hit, like, where do you see right now with the Rams? I feel like they're taking a step back here at this point, because now Seattle's maintaining, and you got San Francisco, who's tough with that defense, and Arizona, who's just only going to get better.
I agree with you 100%. I think you make great points about the Rams as well. That division was already difficult to begin with. And now, like you said, with the improvements the Cardinals have made, just going and getting DeAndre Hopkins, they're in position where they are at number 8 in the draft. There's going to be good offensive linemen that can step in and be day one starters for them to help protect Murray, shore up the offensive line. Cardinals are going to be better. We all know, of course, the 49ers. And as long as there's a guy named Russ Wilson up in Seattle, that team always is going to be a winner, it seems like, no matter what they do with the rest of that roster. As long as Russ and Pete Carroll are there, they keep winning. So you look at the Rams, like you said, and all these guys that they gave big money to now a couple of years ago after their breakout aren't working out anymore. Now we've got all this dead cap money. Yes, they made the trade for Ramsey last year to try and get an elite corner. Jury's still out on that. I mean, if he plays up to his potential, certainly that will be welcome there. But now you're looking at the Rams, and I agree with you. I think they took a step back. I mean, now they're going to go in the next season. Question mark at the running back position. Wide receiver, they're probably still okay, but now they've lost a little bit of depth there. Of course, we saw what can happen if Cooper Kupp gets injured. They kind of lose a lot of their offense there. So I understand wanting to bring him back, of course, and him being a big part of the focal point. Moving on from Cooks made sense for them, but they're still, like we talked about, attached to a lot of dead money there. I'm with you. I think they took a step back there, coupled with the fact that the division is just as good, but probably better because of the Cardinals taking some strides and moving forward this offseason. So, and then you look at the rest of the NFC, and the NFC is pretty tough, really, from top to bottom, especially when you're looking at that West. There's no gimmies there. The South got better, of course, with Tom Brady going to Tampa and Carolina and Atlanta seemingly improving a little bit. So it's going to be difficult just to get those wins in the NFC, let alone in the division. So I'm with you. I think they took a step back there. You look at the roster, they didn't necessarily bring in too many difference-making guys. They didn't have the cap space to be able to do so. So you look at a roster that, was a 500 team last year, and I think it's going to be hard to make an argument that roster really got any better. I think you're still looking at a 500 roster at best, especially given how difficult that division is going to be now. So
yeah, and
I'm with you. I think they took a step back.
Yeah, and my big point with that is like, because I look at it this way: if you take away Aaron Donald and you take away Jalen Ramsey, what kind of a defense does the LA Rams have after that? I feel like that's a mediocre defense if you lose both those guys, and then the Rams are now back to square one. Because my only fear is, and here's the one thing I think the only thing they did smart was pay Jared Goff early, because that's your franchise quarterback. That's your guy that's going to lead you at the helm. Because Sean McVay is a smart coach. He worked well with Jared Goff. I do see that continuing on for the next span of years, but with the front offices and what they're dealing with the Rams, I just have the feeling that they're going to be in a cap dump where now they have to end up getting rid of star players, but at the same time they have to reload with draft picks. Am I right?
Yeah, you're definitely right. 100% there as well. So excellent points again. You take those guys off of the defense and you're not left with much there. And then, like you said, you're going to have to retool with the draft picks and everything. So I agree with you 100%. They've left themselves in a position where it's going to be difficult. But great point as far as wrapping up Jared Goff early. That is the one decision that you can look at over the last couple of years and say, okay, that was a good move. Probably good value, what they're paying him, especially when you're looking around the league and you're seeing what some guys got this off season. I mean, you got Dak Prescott, who's on a franchise deal, but looking for $35 million a year. So you definitely got Goff at a more of a bargain rate, which is good. So I'm with you there. That was the one good move they did make. Got their franchise quarterback sewed up, and the relationship, like you said, with McVay, that's going to be good. I think they're going to be okay there. So it's once they figure out what else they can do, they can move on from this dead money, which created a little bit of a problem here for them this offseason moving forward. But if they can get through that, see what happens, if they can luck out in the draft too, that could help as well. So get a guy that's going to be under a rookie deal that could step in and be a difference maker, whether that be at the linebacker position on defense where they could certainly use some help, or even, a little bit of depth along the offensive line. Certainly they could go wide receiver. This is a talent-rich and a deep wide receiver draft. So you could potentially get a receiver in the second or third round that you could use to replace Cooks and essentially be your, third wide receiver. But my understanding is they're going to go to a personnel more that has the two tight ends on the field with Everett and Higbee, something they were doing more at the end of last season, in which case they're only going to have two receivers out on the field anyway with Kupp and Robert Woods. So I'm looking for them to go more into that personnel, and, we'll see what happens. But excellent point about wrapping up Jared Goff earlier. That was, I agree with you, the one move. Could you imagine if they were trying to pay him as well this offseason? It just wouldn't happen. it would be a complete mess going on there. So instead of only a half mess that they have going on right now. So.
No, I completely agree. Sports guy Chris here on the Snake Sports Talk Show. We're kind of wrapping it up here, but yeah, I agree. I feel like that was a better position for Jared Goff rather than if they're now stuck with dead cap money and they can't even pay their quarterback. Now you got it. Now you're kind of faced with the harsh decision of where do you pretty much go from there? And that's where, as I mentioned, trying to get as much draft picks as possible, because that's what most of these organizations and these general managers have been doing well. The Colts have been able to get draft picks. The Dolphins have been able to get draft picks. So that's what's going to shift me to this now. So we're talking about the NFL draft. And yes, I'll be able to talk about your Packers as well. But one thing that I've said here, I've been doing this on my podcast as well on Spotify, you can listen into. But I had some crazy talks. And one of them that I think has been spurring around, because the Miami Dolphins have a lot of draft capital. They've got a lot of draft picks coming in, 3 of them in the first round. And one thing that I've been rumoring around about is them trading 3 first-round picks to the Cincinnati Bengals for that number 1 pick to potentially get Joe Burrow. I will tell you this, and I look at Cincinnati as a whole. You've got a division where all 3 of those teams, the Browns, the Steelers, and the Ravens, all have really good defenses. And Cincinnati, they rank last in offensive line, at least in their structure. And that's something that I think could pose as a concern to me, because it's basically saying that you're getting your franchise quarterback, but he won't be your franchise quarterback for long because you don't have a strong offensive line, let alone defensive guys. So if this was a trade, that if I'm the Cincinnati Bengals and I'm offered that, because I won't be offered a trade like that ever again, I would go and get, at the number 5 pick, the best offensive line or tackle in the draft, then potentially work my way to maybe getting somebody like a Jordan Love, because you still got receivers. You've got A.J. Green, Tyler Boyd, and Auden Tate. And I would think that, Jordan Love, if you keep – because my thing is keep Andy Dalton, because at least you'll have a process where Jordan Love can learn a little bit from Dalton and maybe get better as we go. And then maybe in that next pick, you either get another offensive lineman or you get a tight end. What's your opinion if that was a potential that happens?
Wow. Well, hey, you know what? I like it. It's something that I haven't come across yet. So I'm thinking about it. But you know what? If I am the Bengals and I have an opportunity to get 3 first-round picks, with one of them being at number 5, I think you're right. Especially, you make an excellent point about that division and how good the defenses are, right? So you look at Cincinnati, 3 first-round picks, and at the spots they would be picking, where those spots are aligned, you could get, like you said, you could get your quarterback, you can get an offensive lineman, and you could get an impact player on defense. If you're looking at 5, you've got every option you want. You can take a quarterback there, of course, still, if you want. You're going to be able to get one of the best offensive linemen in the draft. Derek Brown from Auburn, outstanding defensive interior lineman, is going to be available if you want. If you want to wait and go defense with one of the later rounds, picks in the first round, you might have a guy like Chasen there from LSU. Edge rusher would be a phenomenal pick. Help to get the defense boosted as well. So you would have the opportunity, in my opinion, to still get a quarterback. Like you said, it's just not going to be Burrow. It may be a guy like Jordan Love, like you pointed out, or even Justin Herbert there if you decide to go with him at 5.
Right.
But you also got the opportunity to get, in my opinion, what would be a day one starter for your offensive line, which you desperately need, and a day one starter impact player for your defense that you could potentially build around. So if
Right.
I'm the Bengals and I get floated that deal, and I love Joe Burrow as much as everybody, I am extremely high on Joe Burrow and think it's an excellent fit. But if I have an opportunity for 3 first-round picks in this year's draft class in particular, where you could address 3 glaring needs, I like that deal a lot for Cincinnati. I really do. And Miami, hey, if you went and got Joe Burrow, wow, all right. I could see Miami and Buffalo. How about that, right? Miami and Buffalo duking it out for the AFC East. And I would have the Patriots behind both of those teams, believe it or not. But yeah, I like it. I like it a lot. And I think you have the opportunity to really have an impact franchise altering draft because you can address 3 major needs there in the first round. And I think there's enough depth with those different positions, like I said, especially offensive line. They'd be able to get one of the 2 or 3 best linemen in the draft. And again, guys that would be day one starters. So I like that deal. I like it a lot.
Yeah, this is the possibility that I look at with the Cincinnati Bengals because here's the thing. I think Joe Burrow would have a much better success in the AFC East than he would be in the North because all throughout it is because of those defenses. And look, if you watch Joe Burrow in LSU and you see how the offensive line is stacked, it's giving him enough time in the pocket where he can stay focused, stay relaxed, and get time to throw in the pocket. And he does throw a very good ball, and he's very accurate, and he's also somebody that, he's very precise with his throws. I don't think he's going to get that in Cincinnati because here's the thing. When you come into the NFL as a potential franchise quarterback, the game does get faster. The game gets faster. Defenses are getting younger, stronger, and they're figuring out the offensive lines to get to the quarterback much quicker. I mean, we see this with Nick Bosa. We see this also, in that North where you've got Baltimore, who's flooded with defensive linemen that can get to the quarterback. You got Pittsburgh, who stays consistent, whether it's the line, and then if he throws, you got the secondaries that can make plays. And then you also have Cleveland, who, by the way, with Olivier Vernon and Myles Garrett that come back healthy, that's a team that could literally disrupt what Cincinnati's trying to put on. And I feel like that may shorten Burrow's career like that. But in the AFC East, because all he would have to face is Josh Allen twice a year, Sam Darnold twice a year, and potentially Jarrett Stidham twice a year. But there's not really a whole lot that does happen, only except, Buffalo having the stronger defense.
Yeah, excellent points. I agree with you there. Especially with the way this offseason is going to work and everything like that, it's going to be, I mean, we're not sure how the season's going to start, but at either rate, we know the offseason stuff is not going to be there like it normally is. So for these rookies, especially rookie quarterbacks that usually get in ahead of time, they get in their camp work, they're getting, different drills in with their receivers, the timing and all that. That stuff is not going to be there. So it's going to be even more so. And I do agree with you. Cincinnati, the offensive line is not good there, and the defenses that they have to play, like you said, they're all established. And I could see that scenario happening where it might be a shortened, career going to Cincinnati just for those reasons. So you make excellent points about the AFC East. The AFC East, of course, like you said, I mean, who would you rather have to go against? That group of quarterbacks for sure. And you look at the defenses, and Buffalo will have an elite defense. The Jets and the Patriots, I'm not sure. Yeah, the Patriots had a great defense last year, but they lost 3 or 4 key players from that defense as well that signed with other teams. So no Tom Brady on offense. I mean, you might have a few more 3 and outs. That's going to have greater pressure on your defense. So I agree. For Burrow, that fit would be a little bit better, at least right now, to start out his career. I agree. Going to the AFC East, where you're going to have to go against, like you said, you've got less established quarterbacks for sure, less established defensive fronts. That would definitely be, I think, welcomed. So a better fit. Yeah, you make good points there. I agree.
Yeah, and so like I said, we'll wrap this up here with the Green Bay Packers because I made a point in some crazy talks about this. Like, look, I like the Packers in some extent, but here's the thing, and I'm sure you could probably elaborate with this too. But
Sure.
Aaron Rodgers is coming off a year where he's had the worst quarterback rating of his career. Okay, we don't see Aaron Rodgers going out, making risky throws, slinging it out like we usually would see him do that, even when you got a wide receiver like Devontae Adams. Here's my point in the draft. My thing is, if the Green Bay Packers work something out where they could potentially, and this is where I make a point, because years ago, when Green Bay drafted a young NorCal kid named Aaron Rodgers, Brett Favre was 35. Aaron Rodgers currently, as we go into the draft, he's 35. Is there a potential somewhere, and I'm looking at this, that, and I've heard this from the general manager, that if available, do you think it's a smart move for Green Bay to potentially going and getting, maybe as a safe emergency, another franchise quarterback for the future in Jordan Love?
Yeah, I've heard some speculation with that, and I would not have a problem with that. Aaron is getting out there. He's obviously still an elite level player when he can be on the field. The success they had last year, the continuity for the roster are all good things. They're coming back. There's not a rebuild going on or anything like that. The last few times where we had been to an NFC title game years prior, there were a lot of question marks with the roster going into those off seasons and turnovers and so on and so forth. We're in a little different position from the roster buildup and standpoint that way. But Aaron has had some injury problems over the last few years. He is getting older. It is clear to see, especially if you're watching him on a weekly basis like us Packer fans, the mobility is not the same. That's what made Rodgers such an elite quarterback as well, is his underrated mobility. And he has an ability to sneak away just when you think he's going to get sacked a lot of times, extend a third down with his legs and sneak out of bounds before he can get hit. Those plays were certainly fewer and far between last year, and they will continue to be. So you look at this year's draft, and there is certainly potential where we're going to be picking later on in the first round to get a guy like a Jordan Love, or even one of these other guys potentially in the second or third round. You look at a guy like Jacob Eason from Washington, potentially. I don't think Green Bay would take a Jalen Hurts, but he would be available later on. There's going to be some intriguing options and some guys that I wouldn't mind us taking a chance on for sure. So if they elect to, if Love is still there in the first round, I would not be against that for sure. If he's off the board, I would prefer us to address some other needs that we could here, whether it be wide receiver or linebacker, and then look to the second or third round to hopefully maybe snag one of these other quarterbacks. But I'm with you. I think you have to consider it. I'm not sure how much longer Aaron will play. I think he wants to play another 3 or 4 years, but of course, with the injury history and everything, it needs to be realistic to have some kind of a backup in place or transition period. So, and taking advantage of an opportunity, if you're picking late in the first round in a draft every year, you don't always have an opportunity to possibly get a guy like Love in his qualities. So maybe it's taking advantage of an opportunity when it presents itself, much like it did when we were able to draft Aaron Rodgers all those years ago. He obviously was not supposed to be available that late in the draft. Nobody thought that was going to happen. So if a similar situation happens, I hope we can repeat history and pounce on a guy. And honestly, for a guy like Jordan Love to sit for a couple years and then have a chance to play, honestly, that might be a great scenario. In today's NFL, that opportunity just doesn't happen too much. These quarterbacks that get drafted right away, the expectation is they're going to play within the first few games. If they're not starting from day one, usually the fan bases want them in there by the halfway point of that first season. So does that help some guys? Sure. Does it hurt some guys? I think so. Some guys get forced out there before they're ready. So, but I'm with you. I would take that opportunity and say, let's get a guy. And if he has to sit for a couple of years, I'm okay with that. Let him watch Aaron Rodgers and his work ethic and how he goes about his business. And then you never know, maybe we've got our next guy for the future. So I think that's an excellent point for sure. And as a Green Bay guy,
Yeah, because my thing is like, look, this is my knock on Green Bay, and I'm being honest with you up on this because the fact that they let Blake Martinez walk was, I thought, something that was crucial, and that's where I look at the linebacking position because look, you've got an NFC North that I don't know what the hell that the Detroit Lions are doing, and I don't think either of us do know either.
No.
Minnesota, they took a huge impact on defense, losing Linval Joseph and a lot of really good key defensive guys. And you got Chicago, who, by the way, has actually been improving a little bit more upon their defenses, staying strong. And I think that that's kind of something where Chicago's getting back into the mix. And I think that it's going to be interesting to watch them. But my big knock on the Packers is that, look, I will say this. You take Davante Adams away from this offense, I don't think Aaron Rodgers has anybody to throw to on this one. And look, I like Allen Lazard, but he hasn't proven to me enough to say, okay, he can be a secondary receiver if Davante Adams goes down. Because you have to look at the list of receivers Green Bay has gone through. And not a whole lot of them have really produced a lot of numbers. And I do play fantasy football as well. And I look at these stats, and it's hard for me to make a point when I say, like, look, Aaron Rodgers in his quarterback rating has been the lowest and the worst in his career. And everybody, and I can tell you, I'm sure you've heard this from Packer fans where it says, well, Aaron Rodgers needs support. But, you know, he's got a running back who can run and catch. And you got a guy like Davante Adams who's a complete number one for him. But if you take all those away, sometimes there's some things you can see from Aaron Rodgers who both, number one, is probably where he's kind of slowly but surely eroding, or there's also a point where this Green Bay offense just needs to get better and needs to reload.
I completely agree. I feel that 110%. The one thing I was disappointed with Green Bay this past offseason was, I mean, you mentioned Blake Martinez. We figured he would go. That was a tough loss. Blake, a phenomenal tackler and a big part of our middle defense. But speaking about the offense, I think I was very hopeful we might try to grab a wide receiver. Now, you know, they did sign Devin Funchess, but, you know, that's not a blockbuster move by any means. You know, we'll see what happens. I think it's more of a we'll kick the tires on him and see. He's a big target. Maybe he can go up and nab a couple balls. But as a consistent, you know, guy that's going to move the chains or have a big impact on offense, probably not. But you make excellent points. I mean, they were hoping for Geronimo Allison and Marquez Valdez-Scantling to take step forwards. They did not. They kind of took steps backward, and you know the route running and pass catching abilities just were not there for these guys. They had worse years. So I think it's clear that you don't really have your number 2 or 3 guys there. The depth isn't quite there. I'm with you, Lazard, you know, for being a guy that was a practice squad player that had to step in and do some production at the end of the season, he did a great job. But as far as being a secondary weapon, you know, I'm with you. I was hoping they would have maybe tried to make a little bit of a splash, got a guy like Robbie Anderson who could stretch a defense that you could put opposite Davante Adams. That didn't happen, of course. I think if that would have worked, they would have had to get him more of a, $8 million a year deal, $7 million instead of the 10 he signed for. But anyway, that was a guy I was hoping for. So you look at this draft, and I really, really hope we're going to look at a receiver. There's a lot of receiving talent in this draft. Hopefully it's a guy that's can step in and play right away. There's also a lot of receiving talent later on rounds where guys might be developmental guys. So but we'll see. That'll be interesting to see what they do with that first round pick, because you could have the potential to, if you're willing to trade up a few spots, you might be able to land a guy like Justin Jefferson from LSU. I think Jerry Jeudy and CeeDee Lamb are going to go too early in the first round for a team like Green Bay to move up to get them. But a guy like Justin Jefferson could be around later on in the first round. That would be a guy I wouldn't mind making a move for. But Jake, you make an excellent point. That is the big knock right now on Green Bay. Very happy with how good Aaron Jones played. The running game came along. LaFleur's new system, running the ball more, that's great and everything. Davante Adams, certainly an elite receiver, but it was abundantly clear that aside from Davante Adams, there wasn't much. And when he was out with that turf toe injury earlier in the season this past year, he missed a good portion of games. we really struggled to do much offensively at all in those games because, like you said, we really did not have any receiver at all that could step up. Even guys that have been there for a couple of years that we were hoping to could not. So I'm with you. The big knock there as well. I was hoping, from some kind of development, with free agency. It didn't happen. So I will say I'm high on Jay Sternberger. He's a guy that might step in and get some more looks here at tight end now that Jimmy Graham's departed. But let's be honest, we're going to need a lot more than Sternberger to get that offense up to where we'd like it to be. So certainly a quality number 2 receiver. Maybe they can get in the draft. I hope that's what the plan is because otherwise, I'm not really sure what we're rolling in behind Davante Adams when it comes to our receiving core this year. So I'm with you. We need some improvements there to help Aaron out for sure. So,
well, I can tell you what's really appreciative, and I love talking with you, man. You put some great content up and some really good thoughts. And I really honestly, what makes me feel so good is somebody is at least on the same page and is on the same line. Because look, I would not be talking about certain teams and putting on, knocks on them if I was absolutely sure, because I trust my gut and I trust my eyes whenever I see that, because I am an analytic and statistic person. So when I see something that's off, I want to make sure that I know, what are the stats telling me? And then what kind of performance am I seeing? And that's why I'm I look at Green Bay. Green Bay's got potentials, but the one question is what potentials are they that they can now exceed and get into a higher level? You got Chicago who's coming up. Detroit and Minnesota, I think they're probably going to take somewhat of a step back. Maybe Minnesota looks like a number 3 team, but that's something where, Green Bay has to be competitive. So as we're wrapping up here on the Snake Sports Talk Show with sports guy Chris, great special guest and great colleague of mine that has great content on stuff. There's one question I want to get to and your thoughts on this. Where do you see Tua going up into this draft? I've been saying this, and look, I don't say this as just a Charger fan, but I do say this. They fixed up problems on the offensive line. They've gotten healthy. Finally, after 30 years of dealing with a horrible offensive line, the Chargers are finally doing it right. They fixed the tackle. They fixed the guard. I think they're probably going to go into the draft and maybe get another good offensive lineman. But I think if Tua steps in, because look, Tyrod Taylor's not the future of this franchise. I think if Tua steps in, I think the Chargers, I could ask you this. Would you be comfortable watching a matchup between Tua and Patrick Mahomes for maybe the next 10, 15 years in the AFC West?
Oh, man, how great would that be? Yeah, absolutely, 110%. I love to have Tua on the Chargers. I think that would be great. I would love to see, like you just said, Jake, him going up with, Patty Mahomes for the next 10 to 15 years. How exciting would that be? I think that would be awesome. I think if he's there at 5 and the Dolphins don't take him, still going to be surprised. I know the grumblings in the last week or two have been Miami passing on him and so forth. I still like them to take him if he's there, and if they work out a trade like we talked about a little bit, or they go a different route, and they decide to take Justin Herbert instead, then for sure. There's no way Tua gets past the Chargers if he's still available. I agree 110%. If I'm San Diego, or excuse me, LA, and he's sitting there, I'm definitely going to take him. You're right. They feel they can win with Tyrod Taylor, and with that roster and how good they are on both the offensive line, like you mentioned, I think they can win with Tyrod Taylor right now. So it would be perfect. It would be a perfect fit if there are a little bit of lingering injury concerns that Tua needs to just kind of work through before he's 110% ready to go. You have a guy that's won some games before in this league, took Buffalo to the playoffs a couple of years ago. So I think that would be a great transition, kind of, a perfect fit. So I'd like to see it, who knows?
Well, you can follow this man right here with great content on both pro and college sports as well here on Instagram and YouTube. Follow and subscribe to Sports Guy Chris. Of great to having you on, man. This was such a fun time. I can't wait to do this again. I know with this whole entire pandemic, it's been kind of, pushing back a lot of stuff, and it's been kind of hitting schedules a lot for us. But at the same time, we're doing what we can to kind of, entertain the public as much as we can throughout this whole time. And I think that we are all doing our best jobs to doing so. So keep doing what you're doing up on your contents, my friend. Hopefully, with everybody who's been on here, on the stream show, and of course this will be on the podcast as well to take a listen to. We'll follow and subscribe to you and get some interesting thoughts of what you got to say on some potential stuff, man. So it's been great. I hope you have the great rest of your weekend as well. Stay safe and healthy out there. I know SoCal is definitely a hotbed right now with this whole virus. But hopefully at some point we will get back to some sort of normalcy in the next couple of days.
I hear you. Thanks, Jake. I appreciate it. Appreciate you having me on. I really enjoyed it. Like you said, getting some content out to help to get through all of this and everything. So you do the same, my man. You stay safe. Keep doing your thing. Appreciate you and everything that you're putting out. We'll keep going. I'll have some content out a little bit later today talking about 3 options for the New England Patriots to do here in the first round of the NFL draft. 3 options I'd like to see them explore. So anywho, awesome, man. It was great chatting with you. Great being on. As I like to wrap things up, when I say to everybody out there, stay calm, stay safe. Let's all stay positive, and, we'll all get through this. So, again, great chatting with you, Jake. Thanks for having me on, my man.
Absolutely, man. Can't wait to do this again soon. You take care of yourself.
Sounds good. You too.
All righty. Hour 2 coming up next. It's the Snake Sports Talk Show.